Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Living Astrology with Janet Hickox. Grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back, and let's chat about what is happening in the stars above today. And today may be one of those days, everybody, where you feel like you're being pulled in two opposite directions. A push me, pull you, a seesaw, and up and down. Hold on, the sound is on this. Yep, there we go. Don't have to listen to that in the background. Anyway, so today may be one of those days where you're going to have to be able to find a way to come to the middle and to be able to solve the problem of the opposition. And we'll get into that in just a minute, why that is happening, and some ideas about where it may play out in your life and some antidotes to dealing with that. As well, today we are looking at the goddess Pallas Athena. She's an asteroid that represents the feminine warrior. And today she is moving out of the sign of Capricorn, where she has been hanging out with Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn over the last year. And she moves into Aquarius, where she will meet up with Saturn at some point here in the very near future. So we have some really interesting things to talk about with her. As what does she cover in your chart, and some interesting tidbits about her as a mythological figure. And then as well today, I think we forgot this yesterday, we're going to talk about the Pleiadian-Earth energy for the day. We are closing in on the end of the spiral of the week, the consciousness for the week, the 13-day week. We have come to the day 12, transcending. So we'll want to talk about what that brings up as well. So I'm going to quickly go over here to YouTube. I'm not sure. Every morning I sit here and I go, how do I get to where I want to be? And because I like to be able to see the comments that are coming in. And it's not so easy here, but it's also a whole lot better than it was when I was on Facebook. But it's just different here. I'm going to go to YouTube Studio. Maybe that's where I go in the morning to find all of you. I don't see it there. Okay, so let's try something new. Here we go. I found it. All right. So good morning, everybody. Amy Moore, good morning. I'm looking forward to chatting with you in a bit. J-Lo, good morning to you. And Sue, raise my hand on that. Two directions. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Jennifer Peachy, good morning to you. Asa, good morning. Camilla, good morning. And Mimi, good morning. Deborah Johnson, good morning. Allison, good morning. It's really good to see everybody. Elisa, there you are. Good morning to you as well. And let's just dive in here and talk about these oppositions. So what we're really talking about today is oppositional energy. And in your astrology chart, many times planets plant themselves in opposition to one another. We're familiar with this when we talk about the nodes, right? The south node and the north node creating an axis where the north node is pushing you in one direction while the south node is kind of holding you to the past. And that opposition has to find a solution. And the way to find the solution is to eventually be able to come to the middle. So today, what we find ourselves in is the moon transiting through the final degrees of Cancer. If you remember, Cancer is a sign that is the opposite of Capricorn. And in Capricorn, we still have Pluto and Jupiter. And at the moment, we still have Pallas Athena there. She's about to move out of Cap and into Aquarius. And then we'll have the moon also changing signs later today into Leo, where then we'll set up for an opposition to Saturn. So we have a lot of these major planets, Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, holding the tension over here in the sign of Capricorn, while the moon at the opposite end in Cancer is reminding us about the more nurturing qualities, about the softer sides of things, about the more feminine energy, about the emotional energy. So today's moon in Cancer until 12:30 p.m. when she moves into the void. That's 12:30 p.m. my time. She will sit there in the void for 6.5 hours, 6 hours, 5.5 hours. So as she pulls out of the void at 6:06 p.m. my time. So literally for us here on the West Coast and likely in Mountain Time, for a good chunk of the working day today, the moon will be in the void. For those of you in the further Eastern time zones, you're going to be closer to the end of your day before she moves into the void. So not much to worry about. She will emerge at 6:06 p.m. or 9:06 p.m. On the East Coast into the sign of Leo, changing up the energy, thankfully, because to me, this Cancer transit of the moon has been rather emotional and rather like a roller coasters of up and down and up and down, and sometimes that precipitous dive, and then, you know, you know what a roller coaster looks like, right? That's what it's felt like the last couple of days. Now, today, when we break down what the oppositions are all about, the first opposition we'll come to is the opposition to Pluto. And we know that Pluto represents power and transformation. He takes us into the dark or the recesses of your mind. Somebody yesterday uh, emailed me or texted me something about going through a dark night of the soul. And I believe that humanity is kind of in a dark night of the soul. So if you're in that feeling, then you're right there with the rest of your sisters and brothers of the planet here, as we are in a very huge power struggle. And that's what is represented by the moon in Cancer in opposition to Pluto in Capricorn, where Capricorn represents the old standard, the old guard, right? It represents government, it represents power structures in the outer world, and it represents those large institutions. So Pluto has been moving through the sign of Capricorn, kind of upending all of those systems, right? The economy, our education system, our healthcare system. So everything has been sort of shaken and stirred and then dumped out. And that puts us sort of in a power struggle collectively, versus the individual, which is what Cancer would be more concerned with, or more rightly so, Cancer energy would be more concerned with the family or the community, the smaller units versus the bigger units here. Now, within us personally, then, that power struggle could be something like this: deep unconscious or subconscious patterns, things that we recognize maybe as old fears, old tapes running in our heads, right? Coming up and influencing what we're thinking about or what we are getting ready to do, or our emotions. How do we feel? And we're not always readily able to recognize when that's happening. But right now, here's your opportunity to note how you're feeling, what changes your mood perhaps, or what sets you off on a tangent of your thinking. And what does that relate to that perhaps has happened in your past? Because a lot of times when traumas or dramas occur in our life, in our waking life, we tend to put them away in the subconscious or the unconscious mind. And then when something similar happens in our outer world or in our waking world, we tend to draw almost an immediate, we talked about this yesterday, a synaptic connection to that old energy. And then we begin the possibility of expressing our fear, our terror, our power struggle in the same way that we have always expressed it. So today we get this opportunity in this week of the sun at the gate 24 of addiction to upset that pattern, to kind of find that gap, right, where that experience is coming back at you, and choose something different. So the power struggle here that we can interpret as an us versus them, or a feeling of, being at the mercy of somebody else's power, you'll know that you're in a gap, that this is a gap coming up, and that you have the choice on how it is that you choose to deal with this. Pluto's opposition here would suggest that we can transform anything. We can transform those old thoughts, those old beliefs, those old feelings, those old patterns, and we can do it in a very powerful and sustainable way. So, hey, let's do that. Now, the next planet that will come into opposition, that the moon will go into opposition with, is Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is a benefic planet. He is the representation of generosity, magnanimity, growth, and expansion, right? Making things, broadening, let's say, our horizons or our viewpoints. So on the surface, that benevolence and that optimism seems sort of good. until you really look at the fact that Jupiter here in opposition today may have us emotionally reacting to not having freedom, because there's often a feeling that we are stuck. We can't get somewhere, we can't go. And in this current climate of lockdowns and stay home orders and can't do this and can't do that, we may feel like we are really pushing against those constraints. So I would expect that there's going to be a lot of that going on today, either within yourself, where you're pushing against being stuck at home, or not being able to go do what you want to do, or express yourself the way that you want to express yourself. And the opposition here would suggest that you have the opportunity to grow in the way that the opportunities are showing up for you. Now, this is also a very spiritual planet. Jupiter is often the planet, it rules the sign of Sagittarius. So it's a planet that we think of that rules our beliefs, our religions, our philosophies, right? The things that we believe in. And this opposition may be having us think about things like, what is all of this about? What are we here for? What else can I do? What else is possible? That would be the more supportive end of things. But also, it could be having us kind of feed in a little bit to that purposelessness that was apparent in last week's transits, right? What's it all for? Why is this happening? And what can I do about it? Feeling a little bit victim-y, perhaps. Jupiter is one of the co-rulers of Pisces, and that's where that kind of energy relies or lies. And because today's moon is also in a trine to Neptune in Pisces, it may be feeding in a little bit of that more victim-y energy. So be aware, if you start diving into victim consciousness, you have a choice. Again, right? You have these oppositional energies, but you can always come into the middle. And it's in the middle where you can find new solutions, or you can come to peace. That's the big deal, right? Going to peace. Now, later in the day, as the moon moves into the sign of Leo, Leo is a sign that sits opposite of Aquarius. We have Saturn in early degrees of Aquarius. And that means the moon, as she moves into the sign of Leo, will be in an opposition to the planet Saturn in Aquarius. Now, this is a transit. Thank God the moon moves quickly, because some of these transits can be very debilitating to some people, and they can feel very icky and not, very supportive. And this is possibly one of those feelings of the day where we feel lonely or isolated, and it can be feeling like we're not fit to be around people, but on the other hand, feeling lonely and isolated and wanting people. So we are kind of torn in, this opposition of social isolation versus I really am not in the mood to be around people, but I really want people. I mean, the antidote to one is getting out and being social. And on the other hand is I'm really not in the mood to listen to somebody else's problems or to be around other people. I would be the Debbie Downer, right? So today is a Debbie Downer end of the day, perhaps to some of you. But this again is short term, and it is a little bit melancholic. Some people may describe it as depression, but it may even be just low energy or a feeling of being tired and burned out. I was feeling a little bit like that the other day. So in this case, the antidote is to be okay with whatever it is you're feeling. Maybe get out a good book, or dive into one of your favorite movies that uplifts you. But it isn't, if you're not feeling like being around others, then you have to honor that. And at the same time, if you're feeling lonely or isolated, maybe you just reach out on Facebook or social media, or even, like I said, just sitting down and watching a feel-good sort of movie that can shift your mood, maybe just giving yourself more comfort, taking care, nurturing oneself. So the antidote for the day for these three oppositions that are pretty dang powerful, each one of them separately, but you start to to put them all together, and what you end up is a sort of day filled with these ups and downs and having to merge through these processes. So the big antidote, take nothing seriously today, right? Don't change your life over because of a momentary feeling of either optimism or pessimism. Don't change your life and dump everything because you're feeling lonely or isolated. And certainly, if you're in a power struggle or you're feeling that power struggle energy, don't go out and create a conflict or a confrontation with the people that represent that conflict for you, because it would be misplaced energy. You would be really projecting your own inner struggle onto someone else. And that isn't what this is about either. So take nothing serious today. Watch a funny movie. Practice yoga or some other form or practice that brings balance. There's Qigong, and I'm sure all of you could think of other things. I know meditation on a day like today may be difficult, but moving through something, a physical movement, a physical action like yoga, who seeks to bring the body and the spirit into balance, may be very helpful today. The other option is to get out in nature if you can, and especially by water, right? By the ocean, by a river, or a moving body of water, or just out into the forest, or where there are trees. Do it with whatever rules are in place for you wherever you live. But certainly get outside, maybe even get out and do some gardening, put your hands in the earth. I know we've been saying this quite a bit, but when we are managing the stress of the things that are going on in the wider world, sometimes it's the most simple thing that can bring you back into harmony and balance. I've been working on a new art project. It's called diamond paintings. And they're these little itty bitty beads that represent, they have these diamond facets sort of on them. And it's like painting by numbers, right? They're different numbers and symbols, or it's like cross stitch. And you just take that and you plop it onto the board in the right place, and it creates this beautiful picture. I find that so soothing when I get myself into a twist. And trust me when I say I've got a Cancer rising sign, Mercury in Cancer. When the moon is driving through Cancer, I get into a twist. There's just no way around it. I know it's coming, and all I can do is just go with that flow. So I can tell you, having an art project or a creative project to work on during these times, totally priceless, right? And by the way, if you get those on Amazon or in your favorite art store, they're not that expensive either, right? As projects go, it's fairly cheap, and it is a lot of peaceful energy involved in doing that. So, all right, I'm going to check over here in YouTube, see how people are doing with that. Questions. Good morning, Terry. Good morning, Debbie Tibbetts-Tumiel. Terry says, instead of working, I am upgrading my culinary skills. I know, I'm awaiting breakfast. This is a busy day for me, so I'm really happy that my husband is in the kitchen today. And thank you so much for making me breakfast, sweetheart. I appreciate you. Debbie says, walk in bare feet on Mother Earth. Absolutely. Laura Wolfberg, good morning. I'm gardening as I listen to you this morning. I love it. Perfect, perfect. So even though we say oppositions are difficult in astrology, they don't really have to be. It is an invitation, an open invitation for us to create more harmony or to bring ourselves into balance. And any of those negative feelings that may come up, or those things that you're reacting to, are really just more calls for you to become more balanced, to bring more love into it, and to become more harmonious, kind of as a tell, if you will, about where you are not in sync with the balance of the universe. So, and that happens in myriads of ways all the time. It just happens to be right in our faces today. So, Terry, if you see me going down a hole, tell me to get my art project out. Okay, let's change over now to something else that's interestingly happening today. I had a conversation with Michelle Gay, who you see often here in the morning show with us. Yesterday, she was like, what the heck has happened? My life seems to have changed, and literally changing for the better. I mean, she's been through a whole lot this year, from about August of 2019 all the way up until just most recently. And suddenly something had changed. And so in the process of me processing the video yesterday from the webinar, she's texting me, and all of a sudden it hit me what was going on with her, because she said, "Oh, and I just realized Pallas Athena is on my descendant. What does that mean?" And then it was like those alarm bells going off in my head, not bad alarms like fire, fire, but oh, excitement, excitement, because Pallas Athena has been a key player in the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction, right? There was Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Pallas. And she is she's relatively new in astrology, as in she was discovered back in 1802, but certainly astrologers didn't begin to encompass her path into astrology until much later. And even now, relatively few astrologers are actually using the goddess asteroids in their work. And I'm really trying to be more conscious and more mindful of these new bodies, because they tend to really represent the feminine, right? Eris and Ceres and Pallas Athena, Juno, Vesta, Black Moon Lilith, and all Sedna and Salacia and Chariklo, and we can go on, right, with these bodies that are gaining more prominence as the divine feminine is also coming out of that oppositional energy with the masculine, and joining the masculine side by side. It also requires the masculine to let go of its power structures and hierarchical thinking. But really, the goddess energies, as they become more prominent and we really begin to live from those energies, as well as the more masculine planets in our pantheon, things will come into more harmony and more balance. So, Pallas Athena, she in mythology, remember, is the goddess that was born out of a cleft in her father Zeus's head. He was hit over the head by, I forgot the god, and she sprung forth out of his head, fully formed in her full warrior goddess regalia, and with the wisdom of the owl and her helmet of wisdom on her head. And so she really represents a sort of warrior energy. Now, I want to show you a little bit about why this is a sort of cautionary tale, because Pallas Athena has been sort of forced into this by her birth out of a warrior god's head, and her father being the supreme god of the masculine hierarchy. So she's playing a role in order to become recognized, in order to gain prominence, in order to be accepted. And there's a part of us then, as we look at this motif, or this pattern, if you will, of women who, in order to gain any kind of power in the world, have taken on those masculine qualities. And what keeps coming in my mind is that video back from the 80s, Simply Irresistible, where you have these women that are all dressed up in these kind of suits, the androgynous sort of look, and they all sort of look like what I would think of Aquarian androgynous energy would look like, where they're trying to represent the masculine embodied in the feminine, rather than just claiming hands down that feminine energy, the soft, the flowing, we can be warrior goddesses without donning a sword and without grabbing a shield, because we are not the masculine, right? So there's that cautionary tale here for us as Pallas Athena begins to move into Aquarius, that we want to bring those energies into harmony, but we don't want one to become the other, right? So we see with Pallas Athena this real ability to take things apart and put things back together. But we don't want to take apart the divine feminine and put her back together in a way that's more palatable to the masculine. That would be totally ignoring the truth of the divine feminine. Instead, what we want to do is maybe take apart our beliefs and our systems that have created this disparity between the two energies, and rebuild it to something that's much more in balance and more harmonious. So we are possibly sitting here at the cusp of a recreation, right? A new mythology that takes the masculine and the feminine, the great mother and the great father, and puts them back together in a new way. Now, I wish I was an eloquent writer that could sit there and rewrite these myths, because I think it's a worthwhile timing thing. I think it's a worthwhile opportunity. I think it's a worthwhile project for all of us to think about what are our new mythologies. And knowing that mythologies are only representations, they're stories, they're representations of some kind of truth that is occurring in the moment. And I think often, and this is totally off the subject, but I think often about our total focus, it seems, on making movies about Marvel characters or DC comic characters, these superheroes who have these superhuman powers, Superman, Batman, and the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I could go on and on. If I were one of those guys that followed those things, I could probably tell you everything there is to know about all of these characters. But what I want you to understand about why those mythologies are so prominent is because we've denied our inner powers, and both the feminine and the masculine, and the roles that we've been playing have been sort of a mismatch rather than a smooth flow of the energy that is native to each one of us. So instead, we create and project outward all of these superpower energies out onto these characters. And if you look at the characters, right, the women characters, there's not as many female superheroes as there are masculine superheroes. But when you see those feminine superheroes, they're often portrayed as very masculine figures, right? They have masculine sort of characteristics. So we already can see that our story, we're trying to move these mythologies into more of a balance, so that we're both expressing the truths of who we are through those energies. But we also have to remember that we're both a mix of those energies, right? So I'm not just feminine because I'm a woman. I'm a mix of the feminine and the masculine energies, the masculine energy of protection, of doingness, and the more feminine protection of more feminine energy of nurturing and educating, feeding, taking care of, as well as being in that void, right? The creator energy. So Pallas Athena, moving to Aquarius. Are we going to have ourselves a time where we see new abilities, a new ability to see the interrelatedness of these big energies, and then to be able to rewrite the mythologies that we live by? Pallas Athena, I think, sometimes represents where in our own personal charts we may become overly macho. Or if you're a male, maybe it's where you're overly wimpy or overly submissive. So where we find that piece in our chart, we really have to look at, well, what are the mythologies that we've been living our lives through? And that mythology begins with your parents. So for a woman, it would be the representation of her father, and what was the lesson, what was he telescoping to you through his own life. And for the man, it would be what was his mother showing him and what was his father showing him. And in some ways, it's also the mother showing the female. But in this case, we're speaking more about the that masculine energy. How did the masculine show up in your family? And then what did you learn from that? And how do you then take that and maybe misapply that same energy in your life? Instead of being the feminine receptive, maybe you're being more pushy and being more masculine in the way that you execute your energies. And if you're a man, maybe you had this father that was just overbearing and was like macho energy, and you kind of are in rebellion over that kind of energy. And so you want to be maybe the more artist or the softer one. And now you've got this dilemma in the family between the father macho and the son's more feminine expression of that energy. So you can see we have a lot going on here in the midst of this little body, this asteroid, or this body that was discovered, more than 100 years ago, that we're really now just bringing into play. There's also a quality of Pallas Athena that represents creative intelligence and being able to solve problems in new ways. And that creative intelligence is what was really required on this planet right now, right? We've been trying to apply the same solution to all of the problems. So solutions that worked in the past don't work necessarily on today's problems. And our application of those ways of solving the problem to these new issues is backfiring. It's blowing up on us. So here is our opportunity through Pallas Athena moving into a sign like Aquarius that's very human oriented to solve our problems in new ways by supporting humanity, right? Supporting humanity, doing things that support all and not just the top tier, right? That are programs that are equally distributed, wealth that is equally distributed. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have millionaires and billionaires. I'm just saying that there needs to be the equal opportunity for everybody here on the planet. And that's what Aquarius is doing. It would be the great equalizer in those terms, right? So the Aquarian age, Saturn in Aquarius, Pallas Athena now in Aquarius, Pluto's eventual move to Aquarius, next year's Jupiter moving through Aquarius. Can you see this is building, building, building to where we really have to consider the benefits to all and not just the very small slice of the population that we have been dealing with. And here's another question for all of you in your chart, wherever this is found. What's worth fighting for, or what will you personally fight for? Right? Some people will fight for women's rights. Some people will fight for children. Some people will fight to feed the nation. Some people will fight to have their religious beliefs free. There are lots of things, right? But what will you fight for, right? What will you fight for? Going back to that masculine energy, when Pallas Athena was discovered, it was in 1802. She was in a quincunx to the planet Saturn. And as soon as to the planet Mars. And as soon as I saw that, I thought there is this, a quincunx, remember, is a 150-degree angle or relationship between planets. And it's a difficult one at best because the planets involved do not understand one another. The signs involved do not understand one another. So there's a lot of work that it takes in order to make those energies flow in any kind of direction. So when there is a quincunx to Mars, it could be the misplacement of that warrior energy or the not knowing quite how to express femininity in warrior-like stances. And so we opt to instead follow the more masculine pathway of that masculine expression. So we get these role reversals or these roles that are misidentified, and it creates a little bit of a havoc in us while we are so unbalanced in the expression of those energies. Now, that can also translate into issues or awkwardness with the father image in your life. Like, for example, in my life, I had a father, definitely, because I was born, but I never knew him. He was not a person in my life. I had a foster father who was often very standoffish with me, not because he didn't like me. I know that wasn't the case, but I think there was this jealousy between him showing attention to me and my little sister with my foster mother. So there was kind of this cool relationship that we had, and I didn't have a relationship with my real father. So the question then becomes, where is that sort of awkwardness showing up in my own life in the way that I use the masculine? So each of you can ask yourself these same questions where you find your Pallas. You don't even need to go looking in your chart to find your Pallas. Go back to your relationship with your father. And then how did that play out with your mother in the family? And some of you will have had really great relationships with your father. And so maybe you find yourself thinking, wow, I really have a nice balance of the masculine and the feminine. Maybe some of you had, like me, a sort of absentee father, and you're sort of off balanced as you try to fill in that hole with more masculine kind of energy. And then maybe some of you had fathers who were horrible. And so you find yourself being more submissive or not pulling up your own power to be able to face that divine masculine in your full divine feminine. or not facing your divine feminine and favoring the masculine. So we have a lot of questions that are coming up here, and that plays into what will you fight for, right? What are you going to stand up for? Because Pallas in Aquarius will fight for humanity. It will fight for that unity consciousness. It will fight for the brotherhood of man and woman. And what part will you play in all of that? What will you fight for? What will you not give up on, right? Where will you hold the line? And where will you agree to balance out that divine masculine and that divine feminine? This is all so new, right? We really don't, I can't predict where this will go. I can't predict how this will turn out, but I have a feeling it's going to be really interesting for the next few years. Once we get through COVID-19 and the crash of the economies and we get back on our feet in a new normal, whatever that might look like, then we can really focus on what these new energies coming into Aquarius, empowering Aquarian energy might mean for us. Now, I don't mean to tell you that there's not going to be problems with Aquarian energy. I mean, there will be, right? There's always going to be. But it is also exciting to think about what the high side or the possibilities might be during these kinds of transits. Okay, so let's see here. Mimi says, yes, after the show and a quick trip, I will be back to painting while listening to a great audiobook. The cray cray seems to be in full gear today. No doubt, Mimi. I think that's a great thing for you to be doing. J-Lo, how the circle of life here is always evolving indeed. Mine will be next in Pisces. Cannot wait for the lessons to continue. J-Lo says, OMG, my dad taught me so much and he was so loving, even old-fashioned herbal way of life since he was born in 1915. Now one of my guardian angels. I love it. Kamal, good morning. And J-Lo, I have mine in Pisces, 19 degrees of Pisces. That, I'm assuming that's where your Pallas Athena is. Interesting because you're likely dealing with both the subconscious and the conscious expression of your Pallas Athena then. And Deborah Johnson, humanity. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. So maybe one of these days I will take and look at charts for people about that Pallas Athena. Because she's also, I think it's interesting she pops up in our awareness today, because the Earth is sitting at the gate 44 in your human design, and that is a gate sometimes of patterns. And it's really, really an interesting gate because it's a fear gate. It's on the spleen, and it's the last fear gate that the Earth will sit at for a while, thankfully, until October. And then then it will be the sun sitting at the fear gates, not the Earth. But I think that here we have this opportunity to really look at how the patterns of the past have either supported us or have kept us back to an old pattern, the old way of being, or dragging us backwards instead of propelling us forward. The fear in the gate 44 is the fear that the past will repeat itself. And the thought there is that we don't like what happened in the past, right? In the past, I had failed relationships. I didn't do well at this, or I had arguments with people. I lost my home. I lost money. And I don't want to repeat that past. But, you know, that's the nature of things, right? What you resist persists. And so these patterns keep coming back. And it's up to us to be able to change the pattern. And just because something comes up from the past doesn't mean you're doomed to repeat the past in the same way. So patterns, right, of interrelatedness, patterns that we might want to break, patterns that we may want to look forward to. It's sort of an energy that there's this concept of fractals. And I think we've talked about this before, but let's just, talk about fractals are the smallest part of a bigger picture. And a fractal of a circle might be a little circle, right? And there are fractals in our human relationships. For instance, have you ever noticed how you seem to attract certain kinds of people to you, or that certain patterns repeat themselves? And it might be a new face, but it may be the same sort of situation. That would mean that you are encountering a fractal. For instance, I notice in my life, I tend to attract a lot of Taurus energy, and I tend to attract a lot of Libras. So that in some way is a fractal, right? There's a part of me that is tied in with or attracts those people that have those characteristics that uh, match me, match my fractal. I also notice that I tend to, when I do readings, do a lot of different readings for projectors in human design. Today I'm doing one for a manifester. So I get sort of the edge people, the ones that feel marginalized or feel different or feel odd man out. And I know where that comes from in my own life. But if you look at your own life and you see, who do I attract to me? What kind of problems do I attract to me? You can actually follow, you can contact trace that back to your astrology chart or your human design or your gene keys because of your fractal, right? So we're dealing with these patterns, and those patterns are popping up because it's part of your fractal, but you're not doomed to keep repeating the same energy over and over again, because every time it comes back up, you have an opportunity to express it again in a new way. So I hope that makes sense to you, right? This idea of fractals and how you are part of a human fractal. Even here in the morning show, I see the same faces pretty much, right? People who tend to be attracted to me or to my morning show. I see you over and over again, right? I say good morning to you every morning. And that it is likely because we're all a part of a fractal, right? We're part of the same fractal in some way, right? I don't know what that is exactly, right? Maybe it is seekers, because I do have the gate 11 where my earth sits. That's a seeker energy. So maybe I attract seekers, right? So maybe you guys are attracted to people who are also seeking, that have wisdom to share with you. And so we are all part of various fractals in our lives. All right. So any questions about that? If not, I'll come back and look at questions. I want to do a quick story before I go into the Pleiadian-Earth energy of the gate 24. Remember the other day we talked about the sun sitting at gate 24, and that the gate 24 was about addictions. In its lowest expression, it's addiction. It is circular thinking rather than spiral thinking, right? So instead of thinking outside of the box or thinking outside of the circle, we keep going round and expressing the same energy in the same way. So here's our card. Doesn't that kind of look like Einstein? And the card's gift, or the gift of the gate 24, is invention. And look at the DNA spiral on his forehead here. Interesting card, right? So let's read the story for the gate of invention. That isn't it. Here we go. The gift, of course, invention. The shadow is addiction, and the siddhi is silence. And it says the 24th gift is truly magical and contains the secret to genius. Genius is far more than lateral thinking. It is the ability to make quantum leaps. And you're all geniuses. Here's the wisdom story. I was a sensitive boy with an insatiable, curious mind. With a deep love of logic and learning, my parents encouraged me to study everything from math to chemistry to astrophysics. My unusual gifts for predicting patterns and solving problems were discovered by my professors and eventually the world. By the time I was a young adult, people counted on my mind to answer some of the most difficult questions about our shared future. As the pressure amped up, there was less room for error, for feelings, for free time, or the present moment. Once I was working on a problem and my mind spun round and round. My body got tight and I started to panic. I was frozen. Not knowing how to cope with the awful sense of failure and emptiness I felt, I grabbed a glass of wine, which helped my mind and body to relax. And mysteriously, the breakthrough I'd been waiting for spontaneously appeared. After that, anytime I couldn't solve a problem or felt anxious, I drank. The bigger the problem, the more I drank. It took deep depression and several crises for me to recognize my addiction and accept the truth. There was no escape. There was nowhere to go. Nothing in the outside world could ever end the pain, anxiety, and emptiness I was so desperately trying to avoid. So I turned the intelligence of my mind inward. I used my mind to watch itself, and I got so good at recognizing its patterns and repetitive loops that just naturally they began to loosen their hold. Whenever I bumped up against my ignorance, suffering, or an unknown, instead of pushing against it or numbing out, I dropped in. Now I think in spirals, not loops. I welcome the unknown, rejoice in life's mysteries, and have come to cherish creative invention and innovation above solving problems. Although my knack for solving problems continues to expand, my most creative moments and breakthrough insights often happen when I'm relaxing, dreaming, or doing nothing at all. I'm constantly surprised by how art, music, philosophy, mythology, and psychology relate to all that I do. My gift to you. I'm here to tell you that addiction is not only about what you do, but how you think, and especially how you think during those moments in your life where you bump against the unknown, your own ignorance, a deafening silence, and an inner emptiness. There are whole worlds of possibility in the space between thoughts, sounds, even between your impulses and cravings. One of the most difficult yet most rewarding things you can do in life is to embrace those gaps in your awareness. Don't push your anxiety away. Don't fill in those holes. As you make peace with emptiness and befriend uncertainty, your talent for invention, creative thinking, and living will flourish. All right, questions for contemplation. And I will post these. It'll be later this afternoon, though. How do you cope with moments of emptiness or anxiety? What role has addiction played in your life? Have you used substances, behaviors, or activities to numb yourself or fill a hole? Today, pay attention to an arising feeling of emptiness. Before reaching for that cookie, cup of coffee, glass of beer, or television remote, phone, or computer, take a 3-minute pause to breathe and see what happens. Where in your life do you feel innovative? Is there something new that wants to be born in you? Find one simple way to cultivate more inner and outer silence in your life. Great questions for contemplation, I think. Lovely story, right? Let's see, going back to YouTube, Amy, I love this fractal. I do too. Deborah, I'm a Leo with a Scorpio moon, have a few Scorpios in my life. So likely the Scorpios in your life are helping you to merge through the very passions and deep emotional, intense feelings that you have. And you get to watch them in your outer world, Deb, to see how it is that you're meant to express that very powerful moon in Scorpio, right? Scorpio moon, so intuitive, right? So almost prescient in being able to predict what's going on for the future. Okay. Any other comments? Let's talk about tomorrow I'll read you the story of the gate 44. The gate 44 is also known for teamwork and creating a new way of being together called synarchy. And that means we let go of hierarchy in favor of a new way of being together. And I can't wait to share that one too. Okay, so today's Pleiadian-Earth energy. So today's energy is 12 transcending. We are closing in on the end of the week. We are getting to that. Tomorrow will be, in fact, the ascension day where we get to, kind of look at everything we've learned over the week. So today's energy then at 12 transcending is about understanding. It's about drawing the parallels and the new connections and the new fractal energy and all that we have learned in this infinite nature of the universe over the previous week. And in fact, it's time to understand all that has happened in our lives since the beginning of this week, which was April 18th at 1 seeing. And if you remember, seeing energy is eagle energy in the Mayan calendar, or Men, it was called. And it's about rising up above and seeing things from a new perspective, and also being able to see the details, right? Not just the big picture, but also being able to see the details and make a new coherent picture, a new whole. And so that's how we started this week. So how successful have you been? Right now is our opportunity with understanding energy to take a look at all that we have come to understand in this last 12 days. We might have understood more about endings and how they are representative of new beginnings. and how new beginnings are also a representation of something that has come to an end. And it takes us into an understanding that there is this infinite flow of energy to the universe. Now, transcending energy in the Mayan calendar was Kimi, Cimi, and it was the energy represented by the vulture sometimes, sometimes also by the death mask. It was an energy that was about moving forward. It was that idea of death and rebirth and that whole infinite path of beginnings and beginnings going to endings and endings becoming beginnings, and how we move forward, forgetting our old grievances, letting go of the old patterns, trusting that there's something new for us in that, letting go of what no longer serves us individually, or letting go of things that no longer serves the world, and using discernment versus judgment, right? Not taking the differences that we have and making them things that separate us, but using discernment and seeing how they're carrying a part of the truth as well as you're carrying a part of the truth, and how when we bring them together, we can reach a new level, a new understanding. We can transcend the old and we can come up with something that's more inclusive and more unity oriented. Remember, the differences and the oppositions, today's myriad of opposition energy, force us to find harmony, force us to come to that middle point and to see how we can merge them or create something new with out of differences, using discernment again and not judging that that's wrong, that I'm right, etc. So it's an interesting day, I think, in the Pleiadian world as well. It's always interesting when I see matching words. Like today, I totally knew I was going to talk about these oppositions. And then later, when I put in the energy for, or through the Pleiadian energy of the day, there it was right there. Remembering differences and oppositions force us to come to harmony, which is exactly what these astrological oppositions do for us as well. So interesting day, I think. All right. Well, that is it for me. Remember, today's oppositions are solved by trying to find the harmony, coming to the middle, finding the peaceful point and the balance point. You might do that by going out in nature. You might do that through yoga. You might do that through any other kind of practice that helps to bring harmony to your mind and to your body. Going out into nature, of course, is sort of an automatic. One other thought came to my mind just now: getting around your animals, right? Your dogs and your cats, they can really help to bring you into that state of harmony as well. In fact, they seem to be attracted to us, don't they? When we're out of sorts, then they want to sit on your lap, or they want you to take them for a walk, or they're meowing, or they're playing, wagging the tail and hitting you with their their tail. They know it's time to change up the energy. So watch your animals today as well. Be thinking about Pallas Athena and what she might mean in your chart, how you could look to the relationship with your father and where she is located in your chart to help you discover where your warrior energy is, and to discover what you will fight for in this lifetime. And of course, what is it that we're moving through, transcending today? And also, what understanding are we coming to? So that ought to keep you busy for the day, I think. All right, tomorrow is Thursday. We will chat more about the gate 44 tomorrow, which is where the Earth is sitting. And what else might we talk about? We'll see. We'll see what comes up tomorrow. All right, everybody. Much love to you all. Have a great day and see you tomorrow.